I want to spend the next few minutes just assessing the implications of the result internationally. So let's go first to Ukraine and our correspondent James Waterhouse. And James, we've had that first official statement from President Zelensky, but behind the scenes, give me a sense of what you're hearing.
I think, Matthew, from soldiers, civilians, all the way up to President Zelensky's cabinet, they are analysing different shades of the unknown. I think Kamala Harris' victory would have provided some relative certainty if you looked at what she'd said about giving Ukraine support for as long as it took. With Donald Trump, you had his claim of wanting to resolve this conflict in as little as 24 hours. So what does that mean? Is he going to come and visit Kyiv? Is he going to visit Moscow? Is he going to announce a withdrawing of support? Is he going to present a peace plan to Vladimir Putin? Will the Kremlin accept that peace plan? Or will he, if anything, as is hoped here, will he step up military support for Ukraine? Everything is up in the air now as a result of this US presidential election, such is the nature of geopolitics. America's pendulum between isolationism and interventionism is felt acutely in a country that is under a full-scale invasion and needs help from the West just to be able to sustain its fight. I think when you look at President Zelensky, a leader who's grown to be a political operator, he suddenly found himself on the world stage with the full-scale invasion. He will no doubt try to turn this into some kind of opportunity to make his case. And if you look at the language of his post online this morning to Donald Trump, congratulating him, describing a great meeting they had when he travelled to New York and laid out why he thinks he should continue supporting Ukraine. And he's also trying to pitch his country as an opportunity in terms of business, investment, as well as military aid, because the other side of this is, war drives innovation. There are Western companies as we speak having equipment used and tested by soldiers who are giving feedback. So that will no doubt feed into what Kyiv will try to present to the president-elect in the coming weeks and months. But in short, there are a lot of unknowns being looked at right now.
James, huge questions for NATO now going forward. Huge questions, too, about whether this might usher any sort of change of policy for the Biden administration in these last few months about that issue that President Zelensky has pushed him on about a change in the rules of what he's allowed to target using Western weapons.
Yeah, I think if you're Ukraine, any kind of change or upping of the stakes is welcomed. They need all Western hands to the pump. And I think you're right, that outstanding question of whether Ukraine will be allowed to use Western weapons on targets deep inside Russia, well, that's still unanswered. And it will be hoped that an outgoing President Biden might just give that the final sign-off, especially with hundreds of Russian glide bombs targeting cities and defensive positions daily because of the Russians being able to launch airstrikes almost unchallenged from deep inside Russia. On the NATO question, of course, it's interesting on whether Donald Trump will put pressure on other members to contribute more to their defence budgets. Will America withdraw by any stretch? I mean, the argument here in Eastern Europe is that Russia won't stop at Ukraine if Ukraine was to fall. And they're arguing here that the Kremlin could well turn on Eastern Europe. I think a lot would need to happen for that. Russia's sustained huge losses in this war, and you wonder, whether Vladimir Putin would want to challenge the NATO alliance in that way. But there is indeed that sense of urgency. And Matthew, it's not just a question of military support for Ukraine, which Donald Trump will have to consider. We also have another ingredient, North Korea, which is only getting more involved in Russia's invasion. There are claims now they are being involved in combat operations here in Kyiv, already in the invasion. So what do you do if you're the new US president? Do you choose to respond to that? And if so, how? Because what President Zelensky is saying is, look, Russia is expanding its alliances. We need the West to counter that. But at the moment, in his words, we're getting words and not actions.
James Waterhouse, live there in Kyiv. Thanks very much. Well, let's go from there to our Middle East and our chief international correspondent, Lise Doucet. She is in Jerusalem. And Lise, take us through the reaction there has been where you are.
Well, this is very much the result that the vast majority of Israelis wanted, including the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, who was quick off the mark, one of the first world leaders to congratulate Donald Trump, and not just congratulate him, but send him a warm, friendly message to Donald and Melania Trump, and signed in true friendship from Benjamin and Sarah Netanyahu. But that sort of emphasizing on this relationship, deep, strong, long relationship between Israel and the United States, was echoed by all political leaders here, from the left to the far right leaders saying, God bless Trump. They remember Trump when he was in office the first time round and basically backed all of Israel's long-standing demands, including moving the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. But it's very, just like we heard from Ukraine with James's remark, it's like this proverbial Rubik's Cube. It's hard to put all the pieces together, because you heard Donald Trump in his victory speech saying, I'm the leader, boasting, I'm the leader who ends wars, not stops them. He's reported to have said to Prime Minister Netanyahu that he wants the wars in Gaza, in Lebanon, even the tension with Iran wrapped up before he takes office in January. But he also was reported to have said, do what you have to do. And I think in Israel, there is this expectation that Israel will get a freer hand. But on the other side, there is all the Arab leaders, and they've all congratulated President Trump. They've all spoken of years of cooperation, and all of them have said they hope he will bring peace to the region. And that includes Saudi Arabia, of course. That's the prize for President Trump. He wants to have that normalization with Saudi Arabia. He had a really strong relationship with the kingdom the first time round. So there's a lot of pieces to juggle. Will he, will he give Prime Minister Netanyahu everything he wants, or will he be the man who says, I'm the man who's going to basically be the peacemaker in this region? A lot of, as always, unpredictable.
Yes, at least you touched on it, because Benjamin Netanyahu, he met recently with Donald Trump. But one of the things to keep an eye on is what Israel may do concerning Iran, because we know in the past Donald Trump has been really hawkish about Iran.
Indeed, it was President Trump who pulled the United States out of the landmark multilateral Iran nuclear deal. It was said that was largely that there was a lot of pressure from Prime Minister Netanyahu to do that. During his election campaign, Donald Trump criticized President Biden for restricting the targets that Israel hit in its recent salvo of strikes against Iran. It's widely expected that Israel will strike again. Israeli leaders say they haven't forgotten that their ultimate goal is to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. So there is a sense that he may not put down the same kind of rules. Don't hit nuclear installations, don't hit oil installations that President Biden laid down to Prime Minister Netanyahu. And in the most recent attacks on Iran, Israel listened to that. But there is a sense now that Israel could find itself with a much freer hand.
Lise Doucet there in Jerusalem. Thanks very much. Let's turn to Russia, because the Kremlin said it would judge Donald Trump on his actions, that President Putin had no plans to congratulate him. Relations between Russia and the US are at an all-time low, with Moscow angered by Western support for Ukraine. Our Russia editor Steve Rosenberg sent this from Sochi.
Well, it feels like the Kremlin is going out of its way to give the impression that it's not excited at all by Donald Trump's victory. A Kremlin spokesman, Dmitry Peskov, said that, as far as he knows, Vladimir Putin has no plans to congratulate Donald Trump. He said America is an unfriendly country which is involved directly and indirectly in a war with Russia. Now, I think this pouring cold water onto the Trump victory is partly the result of what happened in the first Trump term, when the Kremlin had very high hopes that Donald Trump would improve US-Russian relations. It didn't work out. Having said that, there is no doubt that what Donald Trump said on the campaign trail will have been much appreciated by the Kremlin. He didn't criticize Vladimir Putin, unlike Kamala Harris, who called Vladimir Putin a murderous dictator. And he seemed to question the scale of US military assistance to Kiev. So that will have gone down well with the Kremlin. Certainly here in the mountains above Sochi at the political discussion club I'm at right now, political pundits, political scientists seem to be very happy that Donald Trump has won the election and looking forward to him coming back to the White House. One quite prominent political scientist with Kremlin connections told me that he thinks that under Donald Trump, the United States will retreat from its status as a global superpower.
Steve Rosenberg, our Russia editor. Let's turn to politics and reaction here. So let's go straight to our political correspondent at Westminster, Ben Wright. And Ben, just take us through the various reaction there has been since the result became clear.
Well, Matthew, Westminster, as capitals are around the world, is absorbing Donald Trump's victory, trying to figure out what it could mean for politics here. Now, as far as Keir Starmer goes, of course, during the course of the US election campaign, he was asked again and again who he would like to win, and of course said that this was entirely a matter for the American people. But there is no doubt that the Labour Party, the Democrats' sister party, wanted Kamala Harris to win this. And frankly, in the last weeks and months, it was hard to find a Conservative MP who didn't want Kamala Harris to win this. So, you know, I think this is clearly difficult for many politicians here to get their heads around. They're trying to work out what the implications could be. I should say Nigel Farage, the leader of Reform UK, he is delighted and has urged the Prime Minister to roll out the red carpet for Donald Trump once he's in the White House. But of course, this featured at Prime Minister's Questions today, where Kemi Badenoch, the new Conservative leader, was making her debut, asking questions of Keir Starmer. And the Prime Minister began by giving his response to Donald Trump's victory.
Mr. Speaker, can I begin by congratulating President-elect Trump on his historic election victory. As the closest of allies, the UK and US will continue to work together to protect our shared values of freedom and democracy.
I come to the Leader of the Opposition.
The Prime Minister and the Foreign Secretary met him in September. Did the Foreign Secretary take that opportunity to apologise for making derogatory and scatological references, including, and I quote, "Trump is not only a woman-hating, neo-Nazi sympathising sociopath, he is also a profound threat to the international order"? And if he did not apologise, will the Prime Minister do so now on his behalf?
The Foreign Secretary and I did meet President-elect Trump just a few weeks ago for dinner for about a couple of hours, and we discussed a number of issues of global significance. It was a very constructive exercise.
So some party political knockabout there around the election of Donald Trump, and I really think that this moment, this election, will define a lot of the politics that we see unfold here in the coming months and years, because there are huge questions about what this means for global trade, of course, the impacts here, European security, the war in Ukraine. That was something that the Lib Dem leader, Sir Ed Davey, wanted to ask Keir Starmer about. So this really is a US election that will have ramifications here at Westminster.
It was interesting listening, though, to that clip, Kemi Badenoch, what she was saying, given that a former Tory leader, William Hague, only a couple of days ago described Donald Trump as being a nasty individual who was a threat to the world. So you can see different politicians with different views from the same party. But aside from all of that, is the most likely way forward less of a special relationship with America and more a sort of transactional relationship?
I think so, Matthew, but in a way, the so-called special relationship, the Anglo-American alliance, a term first used by Churchill in Missouri just after the end of World War II, has always been, to an extent, transactional. It's always been a bit lopsided. There is a senior partner in this relationship, and it's the United States. And it's been through difficult times and times of friction before. You know, there was a proper argument between Lyndon Johnson and Harold Wilson about Vietnam. Harold Wilson did not want Britain to be involved in that at all. Even Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher, who had a very close relationship, they were great political allies. They fell out over Grenada. There was tension too about the Falklands. So, you know, this has been a bumpy relationship for decades. It has not always been smooth, but we are entering, I think, a totally new phase when it comes to what we like to call the special relationship. And I think the next Trump presidency, working with a new Labour government here, despite the work that has gone in behind the scenes in recent months, David Lammy in particular, trying to build bridges, make connections with people who are going to be very senior in the next Trump administration, particularly J.D. Vance. I think that relationship is going to be tested, perhaps like never before.
Ben Wright, live there at Westminster, thanks a lot.